Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I'm today. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. My name is Yemiu Lui. I'm co-chair of the Fix Australia Working Group. There is another co-chair, Maura O'Brien. He sends his apologies as he's off having a good time in Queensland. Lucky Maura. It's great to see so many of you here for this webinar on automated onboarding trading. We'll be covering quite a lot within this. Well, I won't be doing it, but I'll be leaving it to Sandeep and the great set of panelists that we've actually got to delve into automated onboarding. They'll go through how it currently is, look at various ways of doing it and how Fix can help. Without further ado, I'll get out of the way and let Sandeep and the crew do the real work here. Sandeep, over to you.
Thanks, Yemi. Hi, everyone. My name is Sandeep Subramani. I work within the enterprise technology team at Bloomberg. And one of the areas our team covers is the onboarding and servicing of our clients on our Bloomberg FixNet protocol. So as Yemi was saying, today we're sort of gathered here for this webinar. And essentially, it's due to a paradigm shift that we're seeing and we're experiencing on the automation and the orchestration of the client onboarding process. To sort of point to a similar parallel, what we experienced a couple of decades ago was when we jumped from paper trading to electronic trading. We're at a similar point in the road around the whole onboarding process and how we are trying to help automate that process and break down those barriers for our clients, vendors, and participants within the capital markets. With me today, we've got quite an esteemed panel. We've got Winter Chan, who is the co-chair for the APAC Technical Subcommittee at Fix, who is from JP Morgan Asset Management. We've got Francesco Loconte, CEO at Espro, and we've got Kerry Moskos, DCA Global Derivatives. At the end of the session, there will be a Q&A. So for all of you that are wanting to send questions, there is a small Q&A function down the bottom there as part of the Zoom UI. So feel free to shoot your questions as and when. So without more of a delay, I'll quickly get the panel to do a brief introduction of themselves. And I'll also just share my screen very quickly as well. So if I could start off with Winter first, followed by Kerry and then Francesco for a brief intro, please, gentlemen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Winter, and I'm coming from Fix community and also the JP Morgan Asset Management. I've joined the front office and taking care of the investment platform for the JPM AM. And I start my career on investing in the industry since 2006. So I have pretty much experience on the, starting from the fixed onboarding of our firm and also fixed onboarding with the brokers and also the vendor management as well. I hope that we can share the experience here today with all of you on the daily work we need to do with the fixed onboarding and the kind of onboarding and the way that we are having a new suggestions on the automations and the new framework that or tools that we can use nowadays. That's for me.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kerry Moskos. I'm the Chief Technical Officer here at DCA Global Derivatives Management. I guess I've been we look after listed derivatives, mainly in the futures space. I've been in the industry since approximately 1999, so quite a while now. I came into the industry when the floor was closing and went to screen. So from there, I've looked after all the technical aspects at DCA and all technology. I've also sat on the trading desk and executed orders for clients in the listed derivatives markets. So I've been involved in this industry for quite some time, and when clients used the start of algorithms and generally from point and click to more automated services for what they were using. I'll just hand over to Francesca.
Thank you, Gary. I'm Francesco Loconte. I'm the Managing Director of Espro, a financial technology company. I've been in the industry for about just over 20 years, mostly in the trading connectivity space. I'm also the co-chair of the orchestra subcommittee at Fixed Trading, which is responsible for steering the orchestra standard. And I'm the co-chair of the MOST working group, MOST, which stands for Monetary Onboarding, Simulation and Testing. Thank you, Sandeep.
Great, thank you everyone. So as you can see, we've got a wealth of experience in this panel today. So before we get on to specifically the Fix Orchestra, we wanted to take a pause and look at how onboarding is typically done today. In summary, onboarding results in two key aspects. One is the acquisition of clients, obviously, and the second is the distribution of your products and services. So anything that we can do to help sort of reduce that time and friction involved in this process ultimately results in increased efficiency, reduction of risk and cost. I'm sure all of you listening either have had direct exposure or indirect exposure in terms of the onboarding process within the capital markets. And whilst this works, by no means is it perfect, and there are multiple variations that come across in each one of these onboardings. And really what we're here today to talk about is how we can help streamline and automate these onboarding processes. So before we go straight into the Fix Orchestra, Winter, perhaps you could take us a quick look through what a typical Fix onboarding process looks like today.
Yep, sure. Thank you, Sandeep. And well, I believe most of us work with the client onboarding every day, and before we get it connected, we need to send the communications between two parties, two counterparties, and the first things that we need to share is the rule of engagement. So everyone or every firm has their own rule of engagement, and it is not a simple document. It is talking about hundreds of pages, and after exchanging the ROE, each of us needs to go back and having a comparison on and reading through the ROE and compare the expected behavior, and also even down to the data point on the field format and also the value validation, etc., and come up with a development plan and what needs to be done and what needs to be configured or enhanced such that we can talk to each other. Then it comes to the time that we need to prioritize our work, and the tech team needs to work on the development and the enhancement required, and there may be some clarified questions going forward as well during the ROE comparison or even during the development enhancement work. There are a lot of communication involved between two parties, and after the solution is implemented, we will verify by performing a certification test between two parties, and it involves a number of conversations and even having a online conversations to perform the test as well. Even though as you expected, we have the comparison on the ROE and spot out all the required changes. There may be some edge cases on the scenario handling or even down to the value expectations, like the number positions that is unexpected, and we need to come back and go back and also having a further enhancement or re-implementation as well. So the cycles go into like this and for a few number of terms, and then eventually we are satisfied with our certification results, and we will push it forward to the productions after a user verifications. So you can see that they involve a lot of communications and work iterations, and also some potential human error or confusion involved as well. And most importantly, the process we prepare for happy client and happy vendor.
Thanks, Winter. It's clear to see that there's many places where delays and risks can be introduced at a number of stages as part of this onboarding cycle. Sorry, Francesco, you're going to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. Yes, I actually wanted to highlight why basically onboarding has been around for a long time, right? So why this is now more of a challenge for the industry. And I really wanted to highlight what is the driver behind this. And the reason is APIs. In the past, we had some APIs, fixed trading APIs or wheel exchanges, binary APIs. But what's happening in the industry is that APIs now are everywhere and they are proliferating even more and more. Everything is an API. Most of the processes that used to be done by people, including trading, they're even more automated. Like we can take, for example, trading in the F&O space, like which is also been in the fixed income space, right? Like which is going electronic. And the problem with that is that APIs, they're not static, right? They always evolve. You start with a small API, maybe to trade some simple products, but obviously, then you want to evolve that API because you want to launch more products to your clients. And so they evolve. And basically, you're posed with the problem of API management. So you have your business analyst that they design your messages, your API to trade new products. And then you have your IT department. They have to implement those new, those new messages, and then you have you have to test the API, you have to onboard your clients to the APIs, and then you have to monitor those APIs. And this process, which is the API management, is now happening more frequently, is happening across more APIs, and to remain competitive, you also need to do that much faster, because whereas at the forefront of your firm, you have your sales team who's selling your products, your services, but then once they've closed that deal, obviously the client needs to consume those services. So again, you go back to the API. And what we see in the industry is that oftentimes, although you may have a very successful sales team to distribute your products, but then all your clients get stuck once they get to the onboarding. And that's why we're here. And that's why onboarding, like today, is so important, that being streamlined and automated, in particular, if possible, using open standards.
Thanks for that, Francesco. So speaking on the concept of open standards, Kerry, can you please walk us through what Fix Orchestra is and the benefits that it provides with the helping of the automation of the Fix onboarding process?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I came across Fix Orchestra at least a few years ago with the working group, and I saw that there's a need. There's, like Francesco said, there was a bunch of new APIs that people are using, Fix being one. I mean, Fix protocol's been around for 25 years. There are so many different flavors of Fix, and also the implementations, even though it is a standard, may be a little bit different. And that use case really can be applied to anything that a machine uses. So Fix the community sort of identified this problem. So they came up with the concept of orchestra, which was a way to define or standardize how you describe the services that you're using or offering. So what that means in, I guess to describe it in layman's terms, is Fix has a field and messages, and the messages are standardized, which is the standard version of the Fix messages. But there's, for each message type, there's a workflow. So not the messages that people receive, sometimes they have a different response. And the response that different, the way that people have implemented Fix, the response might be different for different organizations. So orchestration is a way of describing how you've implemented the standard and what sort of response you're gonna get. So you're trying to get the guesswork out of your development, trying to define what messages are being sent and what you're going to do with that message. The other fact is when a machine connects to a PC connects to another PC, you know, there's interfaces like IP addresses, ports, whether it's TCP, UDP, those sorts of things aren't defined in the FIX protocol. So you're trying to describe everything that you're trying to configure to and send that to your counterparty so they understand what your capability is or what your system can achieve. Now, FIX has hundreds and thousands of messages, and every message isn't supported. You might be only using 5 of those. Now, you don't really need an application that's going to deal with everything. You might only want to deal with 5. So when you describe your offering, you're only describing what you want to achieve. So your counterparty only has to offer you the 5 possibilities. They don't have to provide you with everything that they're able to do. So this is beneficial for both the large organisation on the buy or sell side, where they can provide you with a specification personalised for you if you need to, but it also helps when they need to upgrade or something needs to change. That might not involve you, so that might only involve 2 of their clients, and the other message types that you're using, which are not being impacted, they might stay the same forever, ever. But on the development of the FIX orchestration protocol, it was designed in the fact that it wasn't there to replace FIX. It was actually intended that you continue to use FIX like you do today. Your infrastructure will remain the same, but it was designed just to tell your counterparty how your FIX implementation works so you can connect to them and make it easier. But more importantly, it's an XML file, which is just a computer readable file which can be read by a machine. But not only can it be read by a machine, it can be human readable. So someone from compliance can read through the manual or convert that XML file into something that's humanly readable. And the actual source or the specification or the XML file, which I would call a specification, is used directly to produce the application or connect to the application you're trying to connect to. So you're not working with a Word document or pouring through a Word document and trying to copy code and paste it into an application. The actual XML file is being used to generate the outcome, what you're trying to achieve. So you're directly using the code or the message samples that you've been provided to do the job. And where that's really beneficial is if you want to test your own system and test your own messages, or change any of your messages, you can then use that to automate a testing platform to test the messages that are being generated, or the messages that are being generated from your system, and what you're prepared to receive and how to respond to that. So in summary, what FIX Orchestra is the exchange of an XML file by each party to describe exactly what you want your system to do. So each side can have a third party develop for it, or use, best case, someone can at least connect to you and use your service the way it is. So I hope that if Francesco, you want to add anything to that, or
Yeah, sure,
anyone
Gary.
wants to chime in?
So yeah, thanks. So I just want to take one step back for a second to highlight the role that really the FIX trading organization has had for the industry so far. And like one of the really great things of FIX trading is really the conferences, right? Because obviously they offer like an opportunity for the industry to meet and discuss the challenges. But really, one of like the real value of the FIX protocol has been to bring everybody to agree on the meaning of on the semantics of fields, right? So when we look at the FIX protocol and the fields, we all know the meaning of every field and we all agree. So that makes the interoperability seamless. because if we're talking about a new single, we all know like what's that's used for. So that really capturing the parties to agree what we are talking about. We all know, and that's the value of a standard. However, until now, the fixed protocol has only extended benefits to the design phase of the API, which means when you have your business analyst, they're putting together these messages to trade, because that's eventually what it comes down to, electronic messages, right, to trade products. And that's what the value is, because the business analyst knows how to use those fields to indicate the properties of every product. Okay, and that's why we have so many fields, probably like 6,000 more in the fixed latest spec, and you can basically use them as building blocks for all these messages to deliver your products to the audience. But again, the value has been confined to the design of the API. But as I explained before, the API management, it doesn't have one stage, which is only the business analysis, but you also have to implement the API, test the API, onboard the API, and monitor the API. And in those areas, the fixed protocol standard hasn't yet delivered any value in terms of automation, okay? So that's the purpose of the new initiative of the Orchestra standard. Now, Orchestra is not the only way that you can automate your onboarding. In fact, there are many examples in the industry of brokers and exchanges that have rolled out their technology. Well, in fact, one thing that we're seeing, many of the more ambitious financial institution clients can self-certify. So you imagine you have a client of yours and you launch a new product and they want to trade it. You no longer have to go through the process of getting on a phone call with them and checking their connectivity. That's the past. What some of them are doing, they have rolled out these portals where clients can certify their own will, anytime, 24/7, and basically streamline the process. Orchestra is one of the technology spearheaded by Fixed Trading that can help you to build like those tools and really deliver like value across the chain of the API. So I wanted to clarify what Fixed Trading has done so far with the fixed protocol. I'm basically getting everybody to agree on the semantic of how we communicate and what Fixed Trading now is trying to do for the community with this new standard to deliver value across the API chain.
Thanks, Francesco. It was good to know that what Orchestra as a methodology can be used in a way to sort of help standardize and streamline onboarding processes, and what we're talking about here today is the fixed way of doing Orchestra, but there's nothing stopping Orchestra being used on a typical sort of onboarding process across multiple different platforms. So if I could just quickly outline or recap the Orchestra benefits. As we spoke about, it's essentially the speed of onboarding. As Kerry touched on, there's a number of sort of touch points today that we face and a number of pauses, unfortunately, that we experience as part of this onboarding process. So it's really to get rid of as much of those silos as possible and as much of that guesswork as possible, which Kerry mentioned. And ultimately, all of that results in a cost reduction of the onboarding process. And the third point, which I think hasn't been touched on yet, is really around the accuracy of the documentation. I know everyone listening here, they've either seen a fixed spec or directly or indirectly, and how many times have we seen this document either inaccurate or outdated? It's probably 99% of the time, to be fair. And this is one of the quick wins that Fixed Orchestra can do to provide you with an up-to-date, ready documentation that's as per your Orchestra specifications. So it can be automatically generated as well. So that's one of the big wins that Orchestra provides. And then last but certainly not least is the testing automation. We typically, these days in this global landscape, you've got an onboarding team sitting in London, trying to liaise with our onboarding team in Hong Kong, just due to the time zone differences, language barriers, whatever it is, that ultimately results in a slowdown of the whole onboarding process. With Fix Orchestra, you send both parties, send them the files, we work out what the differences are, get to work on them, and the onboarding is complete within a matter of hours, maybe even days. Whereas before it used to be weeks, months, and unfortunately in certain cases, even half a year. So that's really the main sort of benefits that Orchestra sort of presents. If I could just take a quick pause and ask the panelists a quick question. Happy for anyone to take it up, but in terms of the most important feature for Orchestra, if you had to pick one, what would you choose?
So in my opinion, yeah. Sorry, Gary, go ahead.
I was going to say the accuracy of the documentation. The fact that you have a file that actually is a working document where you can use for the automation flow, you're actually using the value that I guess your client has provided. And I think that's valuable. It's not just a spec that's hanging around and sits on someone's desk. And let me say that it is quite sensitive information. So, you know, the way in which we handle that information is probably something that hasn't been touched here, but the security aspect around sharing how your system is configured is quite important in today's day and age. But certainly having the message types that you're using and your counterparty can use and use that is very, and have a documentation that someone can actually read is, and it's the same documentation or the same file is crucial.
Thank you, Gary. That's a really a good point. I also would like to highlight that one of the features of the Orchestra standard that are really receiving a lot of attention from the business analysts is really the ability to model multiple products. What you have today, say that you offer an API that trades, for example, CDS and IRS products. Eventually, you actually end up with one single message, like the new or the single, that contains all the tags for all the products and for all the products that are being traded through that API. What Orchestra offers is a new feature called scenarios, where you can actually model the specific message used for each product. So starting from the business analyst and everybody down the chain, like the developers, the testers, the onboarders, and also the support team, they can see exactly what product-specific messages look like without, as it is today, being confronted with one huge message and without really know which fields are used for which product. So the ability to be more specific about modeling the API for different type of products. So I think that's one very good feature that that especially business analysts during the modeling phase are really appreciating.
Thank you
I
both.
agree with Francesca that the automating the API and also serving the purpose of the translation, then it opens up or it enables the automations going forward as well. It can be happen in various ways, not only limited to the kind onboarding, but also innovations on making use of other, even chatbots or other mechanism or new latest technology to interact with the counterparty using the fixed protocol. It is the other wonderful features that I'm appreciate on the Fix Orchestra as well.
Yeah. So sorry, Sandeep. Also, so I want to make a comment to share also what some of the early adopters of Orchestra are doing actually in the industry, because I think this is quite interesting. What some of the largest firms that manage very many APIs are doing, they're actually using Orchestra to build an industry-wide, a firm-wide catalog of message components, such that every API that's released by the firm across the many different silos, whether it's equity effects or basically all the other products area, are built from the same message catalog. So basically, they have unified the semantic of all the products, all the messages, to build the APIs in every silo. And obviously that reduces duplication, misunderstandings, like it really creates a cohesive way of designing the APIs across the firm. That's also what the early adopters are doing.
Great, thank you, everyone. So it's clear to see what Fix Orchestra can help sort of streamline with regards to the onboarding process. Now, the guests are probably here wondering, this all sounds great, but where can I possibly start? How can I introduce this to my teams internally? How can I push my vendors and my clients to adopt a similar approach? Francesco, you're in a unique position given the nature of Espro's business. Not only have you gone through the whole adoption of Orchestra yourself, but you're also helping clients getting settled into Orchestra. Are you able to sort of help share your insights on how listeners can get started with Orchestra?
Yeah, sure. I think so I'm going to wear my Orchestra co-chair hat now. So the fixed rating organization has invested significantly in developing tools, basically software, to simplify the adoption of the standard, because ultimately it is a technology standard, and I hope that after the webinar you'll be interested, like perhaps in exploring what Orchestra can do for you. But ultimately, this is something that your BAs, your IT department, your QA team needs to adopt. And obviously, to have access to pre-built tools that can simplify, basically exploring what the technology can do is very helpful. So Fixed Rating has developed a number of tools to do this, which are free, obviously, to the member of the Fixed Rating community. Some of them, they include things like the Orchestra server, which basically like provides you with a visual environment to design your APIs using Orchestra, but also tools like a playlist, which, for example, can help you to design a huge API, but then select the specific product-specific messages that you may want to export in some XML file, so you can load it into your Fix engines. Or tools like the Log to Orchestra, which enables you to take your log files from production and automatically generate an Orchestra file that describes your API. So like these kind of tools, they like provide huge value, obviously, in terms of time savings. But and few others that that you can find hosted on the Fixed Rating website, and also in the GitHub repository that's provided by Orchestra. Also, one good way to get started is to join the works of some of the working groups, obviously like the Orchestra group, like the MOS group, and so on. I hope that answered the question, Sandeep, on how to get started with it.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Francesco. Just a reminder for the listeners, there is a Q&A panel available, so feel free to drop your questions and answers. Well, we will get to a Q&A session at the end of this. So moving on then, in terms of the resources available to start the Orchestra journey, I know you slightly touched on this just recently, Francesco, but are you able to just sort of expand on some of these points mentioned with regards to resources?
Yeah, so like one of the important aspects that one of the main goal of Orchestra was not to change the existing fixed standard. So you don't need to change your fixed engine. I see that, you know, the carry like is nodding, because that's a very important part. So you don't need to change your technology, and you can actually plan to adopt the benefit that Orchestra delivers in phases. For example, you can start by adopting Orchestra to model your APIs, basically to have one central repository in your firm where everybody can go and they can actually see what APIs you have, what the messages look like, and they can cooperate, for example, to model those APIs. That's already something that Orchestra offers with the Orchestra server. for example, that's very easy to adopt and there's no changes to your infrastructure. And then obviously from then on, you can look at the other features of Orchestra. For example, the Orchestra group is working on a feature called mapping. Obviously, when you're dealing with a very large number of clients, many of them will ask to use their own custom tags, fixed custom tags, when sending you their flow. And obviously, those custom tags then needs to be mapped internally into your system. So Orchestra also offers a way to document all those mappings in a machine readable format, because eventually the goal is automation, which means that we want to enable you to load those mapping files into your electronic system, so all those mappings are done automatically. So that's how you can start to explore the journey to adopt Orchestra in phases, as it suits your environment.
Great, thanks, Francesco. In terms of Orchestra, I mean, we've talked a lot about what it can do, but what is it doing today? Are we able to sort of give any live client examples within the industry of who is using Orchestra today that's live, up and running? Obviously, client confidentiality, so the nature of the firms that are currently using this today.
Well, one example that I've come across is like one large broker that they are adopting Orchestra, but what's interesting, they're adopting the Orchestra standard on their side without requiring any changes for their clients. So to give you an example, they have different clients trading different products, and they're all using the same API. And the way that this broker is able to use one API to receive trading flows for different products is by using the Orchestra standard to classify those incoming messages on whether they belong to like one product or another. And they're doing all of this on their side with changes only to their infrastructure without asking for the clients to change anything on the other side. And a second way that we see early adoption of Orchestra is, as I mentioned at the beginning, by business analysts. Because if you put yourself in the shoes, until today, business analysts, they had to design APIs basically using an XML editor, which is not really a great tool to model financial products. What they can do today, instead, they can use tools that offer a proper UI for them to focus on the job at hand, which is to design like the product without being distracted by the syntax of the XML. And as you know, as I mentioned before, we are seeing like brokers using that to model the APIs in a better in a more structured way, where both fields, components can be easily reused across different APIs. And this is happening today.
Awesome, great. Thank you for that, Francesco. So really that sort of wraps up the presentation. We will move on to Q&A now. There are a couple of questions coming through from the listeners. So I can see one question here come through that says, would it be right to say that the real value of Orchestra in revolutionizing the onboarding process requires the adoption by the counterparties too? For example, if I'm the buy side that adopts this, then does all my sell side counterparts need to adopt Orchestra too? I'll throw it out to the panelists as to who wants to take that question.
It really depends how big the buy side is. If as a buy side you implement the API spec of your sell side, then in that case I would expect the sell side probably to use Orchestra to streamline your onboarding process. So you don't have to get on the phone with them. You have a nice portal, you go there, you log in, and basically you can onboard yourself. very quickly, as Sandeep said before, in few hours. If you're a big buy side, and also so you can kind of like also steer the API in with your broker in the direction that suits you most, then yes, obviously you can also adopt Orchestra because you're managing your own system, your own IT. So you, with Orchestra being a technology standard, you can also adopt it on your side. I don't know whether Winter perhaps wants to add something around that.
Yeah, I think it's also it's not a must to have all the parties implement the orchestra. I agree with Francesco, but you know, it will be a much better if we all implement the orchestra. You can imagine that if everyone is talking on the same page and using the same framework to communicate and to adjust the communications, I mean, using the fixed messages, then it will be the most beneficial and most effective way. By the way, having one side or one counterparty implement the orchestra, we can still and benefit or enjoy the benefit bringing from the orchestra as well. I believe some of them has been mentioned by Francesco before. Even though there is a firm having implementing a orchestra on their own, it can still work on that way and still can benefit from them on their daily work. But it will be much greater benefit to the industry if everyone join the community and share the orchestra, building up the repository. That will be a more wonderful one.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that as well. As far as for a global standard to work, I think everyone really needs to be involved from all assets, from all sides of the business. Otherwise, there's no point having a standard that only works for one side. And for the buy side, their business will change too as technology, or as they adopt technology. They might have, you know, internal systems that they might want to normalize or to message or grab messages from and do things with it. So I think it's beneficial for all sides to be part of it. I noticed also there was another question on the security side of Orchestra. Now, I mean, Orchestra is an XML file, so as far as the standard is concerned, there's no, that I'm aware of, there's no security aspects related to the Orchestra file itself. I guess that's internally, that's something that the organisation would have to deal with as far as the sensitivity of that message. And I guess you wouldn't send a document that was sensitive to a counterparty or leave an organisation if it had sensitive information. So that needs to be secured like anything else within the organisation. And I hope that sort of addresses that question. If anyone else wants to add further to that.
Yeah, Carrie, like probably one thing about this security now, I think what's interesting is that because the Orchestra file describes the entirety of your API, so not just the fields and the messages, but also the workflows, like, which means how the messages are basically exchanged. So that means that allows you to automatically generate the specifications for your API, like in PDF or in HTML. Now, if you imagine one large firm describing the entire API in one Orchestra file, that actually allows you to potentially to generate API spec documents that are specific to each client, or at the very least to clients trading specific product, which means that you no longer have to share the entire 200 pages spec document with everyone, but now you can shares with your client only the specifics of the messages that they are actually using. So that goes in a way to address security, in the sense that you only share what is need to know, like to be used.
No, great. Thank you all. There is a good follow-up question for one of our listeners. So it was mentioning, I think this is on the back of your example, Francesco, of the large sell side that adopted Orchestra. basically asking, can we elaborate more on what their journey looked like? Was it a phased approach, go live with some modules first, etc.? This is to sort of help our listeners better understand how other industry participants are engaging with Orchestra and adopting Orchestra to understand efforts and timelines involved around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a very simple journey. You just have to look at the API management process, where we have the design of the API, the implementation, testing, onboarding, and monitoring. And at every stage, you have a different, let's call it like a different persona involved. You have the business analyst, you have the software developer, the testing analyst, onboarding analyst, and support analyst. So the journey that we see, it actually starts in the same sequence. So first are the business analysts, because it has no impact on your technology, but they start using the standard to model your APIs. So that's the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. The second step that we see the adoption of Orchestra is by the software developer. They're more technical, so it's kind of easier for them to start looking at Orchestra, and they're using to automatically generate all the code for the API, for the fixed engines. Yeah, that's how they're using it. And then the third step we see being adopted, not quite yet, but it's happening, by the QA team to automatically generate all the tests for your API. So imagine that instead of doing basically manual testing every time that you change your API, then you can basically automate everything. And we are working towards supporting the adoption by the onboarding team, again, with automatic generation of the onboarding scripts. And finally, well, eventually we would expect the adoption by the production team. They should be able just to load the Orchestra file into their system and basically monitor the production flow for any message that does not comply with the rules of engagement. And to get started, obviously, you can contact the fixed trading organization, and they will be able to point you to these different like tools and resources that are available.
Great, thank you. And I know we're running out of time, but there's a couple more questions still that I guess they're asking, which is great to see. One of the questions was just around the scenario testing that we alluded to earlier, whereby you're able to predefine particular scenarios that you want to automate the testing with. What happens in the scenario where you've got one of the questions is essentially, isn't using this software would be specific to a client? In the case that I have a client for equity and another one for F&O and another one for NOE trades to be sent to, how would test cases be defined in this case? Is someone able to walk us through a practical example of how that would look in the Orchestra world?
Yes, I think this is actually a great question, because before Orchestra, the QA team has one giant new order single, and they have to figure out what fields they have to fill in on the message for equity or for F&O or for any other product. But with Orchestra, because of the scenario, you can actually refine the definition of a new order single for every specific product. So when you hand over the API spec to your QA team, you're making their job much simpler, because they know exactly what a new order single for every product looks like, and therefore it's easier for them to test that API.
Right.
I think I'm pretty sure that on the fixed members have access. I think they call it in Orchestra score, which is a domain specific language, which is an expression language, but it actually defines, I guess, or describes your different scenarios for that use case. So if you have a look, I think that's available, or something like that is already available via this to fixed members to have a look at. I'm not sure whether it's that specific scenario, but certainly an example of how that is done.
Okay, great. I'll just stop sharing the screen there as we sort of look to wrap up. I guess one of the last questions I'd like to ask is more around from the business commercial side. In terms of what the rough sort of current cost looks like from a typical fix onboarding process versus what the potential cost would be with Orchestra being incorporated, and more importantly, the cost savings that will be derived as well as the time savings. Is there any sort of ballpark estimates any of our panelists willing to share here in terms of what Orchestra can provide from a business and commercial perspective?
Well, it's difficult obviously to estimate because every firm has got different cost structures, but if you bear in mind that, as I described, Orchestra provides value at every step of the API management, BAs, developers, testers, onboarders, and support, where you can go like literally from manual to automated. So you're basically looking at improvements of probably tenfold, right? Because from going from manual testing to automated testing, it's at least tenfold. Then you can estimate basically the return on investment, probably at the very least half your cost. But I think that's a very conservative estimate, like with everything related to automation.
And I think in addition to that, the maintenance costs of having, for example, a new regulatory rules or a new requirement going live in the industry or in the market, you need to recertify all the relationship as well. And there is also another area that the time to market as well. It is in addition to the cost saving, it shortens the time to set up the relationship or connections with your client or with your vendor. It also means that you will get your business earlier or sooner compared to the traditional way of the account onboarding as well.
No, thank you. That's great points, and I appreciate that it is quite difficult to give a ballpark in those sort of estimates. There was another question around whether you can actually see a demo of Orchestra in action. We actually do have a video that is available for our listeners. We can share that on a link post this webinar, where actually Winter himself goes through a real life example as to how Orchestra can work and how you can set up all the various standards and the scenarios, etc. So we can share that post this call. One of the last questions here: how can we get access to Orchestra? Fairly simple one, and the last one: APIs. What does Orchestra support? One of the gentlemen able to answer both those questions?
Yes. It's quite interesting that the Orchestra standard used to be called Fix Orchestra, but then very quickly the working group realized, wait a minute, this technology can actually support binary protocol, like those used by exchanges, market data protocols, and so the Fix word was dropped from the name and just called Orchestra. So I think it's fair to say that Orchestra can support also binary protocol. There are some firms that have used, that put Orchestra to the test to implement protocols such as, I can mention something that some that the working group has been working with, like for example, 9C Pillar, SBE, the Hong Kong Exchange Protocol, the Japan Stock Exchange Protocol, and so far I have to say that Orchestra has held up quite well. Some that even they're looking to use it for ISO 20022 or Swift protocol. So that's actually quite good because it's not a one-trick pony, but especially for exchanges, right? Because they have all these different type of APIs. That's quite a good proposition.
Great. No, thank you, everyone. So that essentially wraps it up for today's webinar. On behalf of Fix Trading here in APAC, I'd like to thank all the listeners for dialing in, hope you took away some great insights as to how Orchestra can help with the onboarding process within your firms and how it can be adopted as part of the wider industry standard. Final thanks to all the panelists here today. Yemi, Francesco, Winter, Kerry, many thanks for all of your time. Fix is always done on a volunteer basis, so thank you for all your time in explaining to all of our listeners the benefits of Fix Orchestra. If there's nothing else remaining from our panelists, we will wrap it up. So thank you everyone for dialing in and listening into this webinar.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandeep.